I upload daily NBA videos on this channel, so if that is something that interests you, then subscribe. Also drop a like on this video. It only takes 1 second and it makes a massive difference. Today we have more hot takes. Yep, that's hot takes. I never know how to intro these because you know what it is. Steph is higher than Kevin Durant all time. Not saying he is a better player, but he would rank higher. I think I agree with this. Last time I checked, I believe I had Steph higher than KD by literally 1 spot. The thing about it is it's really just who is the better player and who ranks higher all time are not necessarily one and the same. So for that reason, I have Steph over KD, even though I would say prime, not necessarily like prime year, but just in general, their entire primes. I would probably say that Kevin Durant is a little bit better of a player than Steph. His all-around scoring is better, his defense is much better, and his rebounding is much better, obviously, as a near 7-footer. So yeah, I do believe that Kevin Durant all-time as a talent is a tad higher than Steph, but I think Steph all-time is a higher ranked player all-time because he has the legitimate championship, at least for the most part, and then one of the most impressive offensive seasons ever. Actually, I'd say the most impressive offensive season ever in 2016, another MVP on top of that, whereas Durant has 1 MVP, 2 rings, and both of those rings are pretty questionable. So I would put Steph over Kevin Durant all time. I also don't think it's that crazy to put Kevin Durant over Steph all time. I think it's relatively close regardless. This year is not a championship or bust season for the Nets. Next year will be the true test after they find some role players who are ring chasing in free agency and have developed some real chemistry between the big three. This I agree with. When I've seen people say that the Nets are championship or bust and they're just talking about this season, I think that's pretty ludicrous. If you want to say they're championship or bust with this big three, then yes, I would agree, because if you have these 3 players on your team and you don't get a championship out of that, then you have made a mistake somewhere. And on top of that, all the draft assets they gave up for James Harden, this team has to win a championship for all of that to have been worth it. But right now, this year in particular, it's not like if they don't win a championship, it's all over. These guys can be together for the next 4 years or so, and I think they'd be competitive every year of that, and I think they can win a championship. I'd say they're championship or a bust as a core, but this year individually, no, not so much. They cannot win a championship and things can be just fine. The Bucks can beat the Nets in a playoff series because unlike the Heat or the Raptors, they have 0 ways to stop Giannis, and the Bucks have a good enough perimeter defense to at least keep up with the Nets' offensive output. This is my biggest concern with the Brooklyn Nets, is that they can't really stop anybody inside. It used to be a couple of years ago that wasn't really a big concern, but now in the East you have Giannis and you have Joel Embiid. Out West you have Jokic, Anthony Davis. It's definitely important to have an interior presence if you're trying to be a contender, because a lot of the top contenders have a very good interior score, and the Nets have no way of stopping that. And the thing about the Nets is, in comparison to the Bucks can be a good offensive team, the Nets can be a good offensive team, but the Bucks can be the best defense in the league. Meanwhile, the Nets can be pretty damn bad at defense. For that reason, it's not ideal, this matchup for the Nets. I do believe the Nets can beat them in a series, but if I had to put my money on it, I would say the Bucks, just because there's literally nobody on that team that's going to slow down Giannis. Maybe Kevin Durant if he went full effort, but even then, I don't think he's going to have that big of an impact because of how skinny he is in comparison to Giannis. But yeah, I definitely am concerned about that with the Nets. And actually, I mentioned the skinny thing. I think Kevin Durant and Giannis are almost the same weight, which is weird to think about, but like Giannis is much more strong. I don't really know how that works, but yeah, I feel like someone's going to point that out in the comments, and I'm fully aware of that. But yeah, whatever. I believe the Bucks will beat the Nets in the playoffs if they do match up, but it can go either way. The Rusty and Mojo Show is the best podcast out there. See, this is a good take right there. And if you don't agree with it, then you should go watch the podcast and decide for yourself. And also subscribe to the podcast channel. And also like the videos. Definitely not a shameless plug right here. Luka has improved substantially in the defensive category, whether that be him trying more or better IQ, he has gotten better. The thing about Luka is, I don't even think he was really that bad of a defensive player when, like, the last 2 years when he was getting shit for it. Really, Luka is a high enough IQ player to where he doesn't make too many defensive mistakes, and then he's a big enough body that, generally speaking, he can get by. Like, if you're 6'8" and, like, I don't know, 220, 230, you're generally going to be pretty fine defensively so long as you don't have some really good player matched up against you. But now, it was really in the past, it was a matter of effort. This year, Luka has put up more effort, for sure. So I think Luka is actually kind of, I don't know that I'm going to quite label him a plus defender yet, because it's very well possible that he drops off, because I mean, Zach LaVine has been kind of a plus defender for the Bulls this year, and I don't expect that to hold up. But I think he could very well be a plus defender, and it was never really an IQ or a size thing. It was just effort, and if he's going to put up the effort, then yeah, he is a plus defender. Just want to see if that effort sustains itself over the long term. If any season would have an asterisk, it would be this one. With the delays, some teams not being able to establish chemistry, like the Wizards have not played in a week. It's not like the bubble where the situation is comparable for every single team. Yeah, this is an issue that I was worried about with the season not being shut down. I mentioned it in my The NBA Might Shut Down video, which obviously has not happened yet. Unfortunately, there's going to be a lot of teams that kind of get shafted by this whole thing, like the Sixers having to play that game with 8 players. There's a bunch of other teams who have weirdly been like, they also had 8 players, but their games were allowed to be delayed. And it's like, why is the league letting this team play or forcing this team to play and not like making this other team play? It seems like they're picking favorites, and that's an issue that fans have been complaining about, and rightfully so. It's not ideal for sure. And I do think there is going to be a couple of teams that end up looking worse than they probably would have under normal circumstances. But for the argument here that the situations are not like directly comparable for every team, I mean, there might be a few teams that get luckier than others, but at the end of the day, they are all kind of having to deal with the non-bubble circumstances and the non-regular circumstances. I think there's a good chance over the long term it kind of balances out, but I do think there's going to be a couple of teams that get screwed out of being as good as they could have been. Just hopefully it's not too substantial, but I do agree that this season has very high asterisk potential next to it. I'm just hoping it doesn't work out that way. Joking, and I assume that auto-corrected from Jokic, is only a quote-unquote good passer because he has the green light to do that. Now, this is one of the worst takes I have gotten on this channel, so congratulations to this guy for having one of the worst takes that I've ever read on this channel. What the fuck does that mean? Jokic is a great passer because he's a great passer. Have you watched a Nuggets game? Because he's not just like force-feeding assists. And the Nuggets have consistently been one of the best offensive teams in the league, despite the fact that the personnel outside of Jokic, I mean, it's good offensively with Jamal Murray and Michael Porter Jr., but it's not outstanding. And Jokic has pretty much single-handedly made that a great offense because his playmaking is so elite. Jokic is a quote-unquote good passer. Actually, no, he is a phenomenal passer. There is an argument that he is the best passer in the league. That's how good of a passer he is. Not because of a system he was put in. Literally, the system was built around how good of a passer Jokic is. It's not like Jokic went to some team that was built around having centers play make. Like, what the fuck is that logic? No. Jokic is a great passer. This take is dumb, and that's all I have to say. Luka will be the GOAT at the end of his career. Well, it's certainly possible. I would just make the argument that I think a lot of people have kind of had the perspective of, well, Luka is so good so early, he is going to be the greatest player ever. But if you look back at it, almost every player who is one of the top 10 players of all time, and even really the top 15 for the most part, started off their career being pretty much amazing immediately. Like LeBron and Luka had a kind of comparable rookie year, and then they had a kind of comparable second year. Michael Jordan averaged, I believe it was 29 his rookie year, something like that. Magic Johnson was kind of as good as he was going to be in his rookie year. Like, he was an amazing, like, top 5 player pretty much his rookie year. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, same case. Bill Russell, Wilt Chamberlain, same case. Fucking Larry Bird, same case. Like, these players came into the league and they were already awesome. And maybe they took a year where they were not as amazing with LeBron, but for the most part, pretty much immediately all-star, superstar caliber players for those players that are in that kind of category. And for that reason, I feel like Luka is getting a little bit more of like, well, he's so good this early, that clearly means he's on that trajectory. And I do agree that it is a positive sign for him having that trajectory, but there are plenty of other players who have had that kind of start to their careers, and they ended up being top 10 of all time, but they didn't really make the GOAT conversation like a Larry Bird or a Magic Johnson. I mean, like, they're in the GOAT conversation, but I mean, like, the GOAT conversation, like the for real, like, top 2 players in the GOAT conversation, which are Michael Jordan and LeBron James. If you disagree with that, sorry, you're wrong. You're just wrong. Not really. It's all subjective, but to me, I think it's pretty clear that those are the two greatest players of all time. Don't know how we got here, but Luka, he has potential to be one of the greatest players of all time. The biggest thing holding him back has been the defense. As we mentioned earlier, the defense has improved, but in order to be even a top 5 player of all time, I think you have to be at least better than an average defender. I think Larry Bird is probably the only player in my top 10 who is just like an average defender, and even then he was probably more on the positive than the negative there. So yeah, defense is going to be what holds back Luka. If he's able to become a good defender, then that's going to really increase his potential trajectory. But Luka definitely has a case to be one of the top 10 players of all time by the time his career is over. We're just going to have to wait and see. In terms of the GOAT conversation, need to see more for him defensively before I say anything like that, even close to confidently. Also, there have been plenty of players in the past who seemed like they were going to be the GOAT and then they didn't. So yeah, you're just going to have to wait and see. The Hawks would be 100% better if Trae didn't dribble out half of the clock and play more off ball. This is something I have talked about for a while now. I'm also planning on making a video on Trae Young sometimes this week, so I'm going to be watching some Hawks games to really keep an eye on it. I have made the point before with Trae that he really needs to be more of an off-ball player. He's a very good ball handler, and really there's no one else on this Hawks team that you'd rather have the ball more at any particular moment, but I think you can make that same claim with like Steph Curry on the 2016 Warriors. Like, why would you give the ball to anyone else? But really it's because getting him working off ball makes him a more effective overall player, which is better for your team's offense overall. And for that reason, I believe Trae would be better off playing more off ball. I think the Hawks would be better off if he played more off ball. And I think that's a shift that they need to make if they want to break out into being a really solid playoff team and then eventually down the line a contender. Ja Morant has a higher ceiling than Zion. No. If you want to make the argument that Ja Morant will be a better player than Zion due to injury factor, or Zion being an overhyped prospect, you can go for that. You can go for that angle. But in terms of who has the actual higher ceiling, I don't think this is really a discussion. Zion has the potential to be the best player in the NBA. Ja Morant probably has the potential to be, I don't know, the 8th best player in the NBA, maybe being generous, cracking into the top 5. But Zion, if he figures out his defense, which I think he very well can because he was a good defensive prospect, he can be one of the best defensive players in the league, and then he can be a guy who can get 30 on like 58% shooting and just be impossible to stop at the basket. So Zion has higher potential than Ja Morant easily. If you want to make an argument that Ja is going to be better than Zion for his career, I think there is an argument for that. But just pure looking at their potential ceiling, Zion wins that conversation rather easily. But those were your hot takes and my opinions on those hot takes. Go follow me on Twitter in order to ask questions, or sorry, cut that out. So those were your hot takes. Go follow me on Twitter if you want to submit your own hot takes for when I ask for them, or to see me tweet very weird shit, because that's what my Twitter is for. Shout out to Rudy for editing this video. That is the end of this video. Please be sure to like and subscribe for more NBA content like this, and keep the outro music.